Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my process for how I created this art piece. I'm going to be sharing how I think about making this art piece, all the steps I did along the way, how I came up with the idea, how I go about making the composition, the brushes I use, and all the references that I use for making this art piece. And I'm also going to be going over the fundamentals required to make an art piece like that, so y'all can kind of get a grasp of what fundamentals that you need to work on in order to make an art piece that's similar to this. And I'm also just going to be sharing whatever tips come to mind along the way as we're going through this time lapse of the video. First, as a quick introduction, hello, my name is Anthony, and I created this channel originally to document my art progress over the past 3 years of going from knowing nothing about art, knowing nothing about social media, and just posting and learning along the way. But I've recently transitioned this channel to trying to gather up a small little army of artists who want to grow artistically and also grow with God, and to use our skills to glorify God and to use our artworks to bring God back into this world, because I do believe that art is a very spiritual tool and we have the power to touch people in a way that other people who don't have our skills wouldn't be able to reach. Okay everyone, and for the first part, here are the art fundamentals that you will need to actually do this art piece. This is like a very rough overview of the skills needed. So for the first part, you're gonna need like a very basic, maybe even intermediate understanding of perspective, because the perspective in this piece really isn't too complicated. It's really just 1-point perspective for the environment. And the real hard part about this perspective that I would say is the knight, the subject that's in the foreground of this, because the reference we used isn't exactly this reference. The reference we used is actually a knight from a different perspective, and we had to rotate it. However, this perspective I believe is still pretty easy, so I would say it's about low intermediate, high beginner for the perspective. As you can see, the anatomy is very, very basic. I would say the hardest part about this anatomy really is the perspective part of it, of getting the armor onto the character while rotating it from one perspective to a different perspective. So the composition I put a little bit higher just because on this particular art piece, the composition is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. I do believe composition is probably one of the most important pieces, components to making a piece of art, because no matter how good everything else is, if the composition just really isn't that good, the whole thing kind of just falls apart. And if the composition is really good but everything else is lacking, you kind of get a lot more grace. So the composition is just very important. And I put the style pretty high as well, because it's my style, it's what I grew into. So obviously it's going to be easy for me, but for somebody else has a different style, it's not going to be so easy. So that's why I just put it higher. In observation, we used 5 references for this, so that's why we are going to need a good amount of observation skills, and that will also go into rendering as well, because the rendering in this isn't too difficult, but you do need to have a pretty good foundation in rendering. The gesture is probably just as simple as it gets for a gesture for a character. It's really just the back. There's not really anything dynamic going on with the gesture, so you don't really need too high of a skill level for that. And for the colors, I put that pretty high because there is a good amount of colors, a good amount of saturation where saturation needs to be, desaturation where the desaturation needs to be. And we're gonna get more into the colors once we start going into the time lapse, so y'all can just see for yourselves. But I would put colors pretty high because I know colors can be very difficult for a lot of people, and it's still pretty difficult for me sometimes. And shading just goes with the rendering. If you can't really shade, then rendering is going to be pretty difficult in my opinion. So I put just a little bit for shading, and the environment maybe it can be a little bit lower, but I put environment there just because there is an environment going on in this art piece. The character is outside, and we do need to know how to make this ridge or this valley or whatever it's called. So without further ado, let's get into the time lapse, and I'll start breaking it down further from there. Okay, so before starting any of these art pieces, what I would typically do is I'll kind of get an account of where I am spiritually, and this can go a lot with whatever trials and tribulations or whatever season I am in life. So recently I've been feeling really pressured. There's just been a lot going on, both just financially, relationship wise, and just life wise. I kind of feel like I'm kind of up to here with a lot of stuff that is going on. So from there, after I get an account of where I am spiritually, I'll try to find a few Bible verses that really speak to me. For me, this Bible verse from 2 Corinthians really spoke to me. It says, "We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair." And from there, I'll start to try to think of some sort of composition to go with that. And the composition I decided to go with is I thought of maybe like you're in a valley. The reason I kind of thought about that is because typically we think of being in a valley, kind of being like in a low point of life, and as well as the valley kind of closing in kind of gives like this sense of claustrophobia onto the character. And you also see later on there's like demons that I put in there, because if you've been on this journey with God, you know that there's a lot of dark forces in this world, and there's also voices in your head that really try to bring your spirit down. And in this image, I wanted to put how they have kind of like the high ground on you, but I put the cross at the very top and kind of like the center almost to remind us that we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but we're not in despair, and that we have God with us looking over us, and that is where we keep our mind at. So that's kind of like an overview, and obviously I put like the lava there to kind of get more of like a sense of danger that's going on in this art piece. So first thing I'll do after that is I'll start putting down the composition with like a pencil, like the Procreate pencil. And once I start getting a composition and I like the composition, this is like very rough stage. And the reason you get the composition down first is because everything falls into place afterwards. You're trying to get the big problems out of the way at the beginning. You're trying to work from big to small, because if you start working and the composition doesn't work, then you're gonna have to scrap your whole art piece, and you're just wasting a lot of time. So it's very important just to get the composition down quickly and just get all the elements sorted out. And because if you don't like it, then you only spent like a few minutes to a few seconds putting down the composition, and you can just move on to the next thing versus putting in all this work and then having to scrap it later. So right now I'm just putting in the composition, and again I'm just using 1 point perspective, and I'm kind of just doing this in my mind because for me at this point it's pretty simple. So I'm doing 1 point perspective, and for the ridge I'm just kind of making it like kind of like in a zigzag because it's a ridge. So I'm not strictly following the perspective lines, I'm just kind of using it as a guide inside my mind. And from there I will use a separate layer underneath the composition layer I did with the pencil, and I'll go in with a soft brush and I'll start blocking in all the colors that I need and all the values that I want to start to get more of a sense of the composition, and again working from big to small. And as you can see with these colors, I'm kind of using a very desaturated blue, and I do this because I'm trying to keep all the cool colors and the dark colors onto the side to again frame the composition. Because instead of, a lot of people use just straight up gray, but I find it's a lot better to choose a hue and keep it close to the grayscale, so to keep it desaturated instead of just going straight gray, because you can get a good color temperature out of it this way. Then I'll go into a separate layer and start putting in the lava to kind of get that sense of danger in this, and I would use a light pen, and I would use a very saturated red hue, and I would use the color wheel for all of this because for me it makes things a lot easier than using any of the other options. And again, with the light pen, just putting in sparks real quick, and you'll see it's going to be a theme later on, but I try to work from big, medium to small. So as you can see on the top left, how that lava is a bit larger, and then further on it gets smaller to medium and then smaller. And here you can see I'm making things even darker around, because that's where we're at, and I'm still trying to frame the composition more. Then I'll start blocking in colors, and I used this reference to find the colors that I wanted. I would just go on Pinterest, type in sky, and then I would find whatever color I think would work with the composition, and this is the color that I decided to go with. And again, you can see the theme that I'm talking about, of where I work from big to small. So you can see I haven't started putting in any details yet. I'm just working, I'm trying to get all of the big picture stuff out of the way, and then we can start working on the details later. And also, as a side note, I'm also working on different layers just to keep things organized. So the sky is on a layer behind everything else, and then as you work forward, those layers will be on top. And as you can see, again, I try to frame the composition so the sky at the top is dark, and then as it gets closer to the cross, you get a lot lighter. And you'll see I'm putting in the verses in a spot that's not going to obstruct the artwork, and it's going to work well with the composition. I get this text from Canva, and I use the all around font. And then from here, I move the font in using the distort tool on Procreate to continue getting that sense of perspective onto the valley or the ridge. And as you can see, I also blocked in the character as well. And I'm trying to get a sense of what colors that I want to use for the character. Again, using cool colors for the characters. And the reason I like to use cool colors, especially for this art piece, is because I like to play around with warm colors and cool colors in the same art piece. So as you can see, the sky is very warm, and as well as the lava going around, but everything else, like the valley and the character, are cool. So it kind of gives a sense of contrast. And also, again, I'll go in with the light pen, and then I'll start putting sparks around the character. I just had the idea as I went. It kind of makes the piece look a lot more dynamic. And as you can see, now I'm starting to go in with the details, and I'm starting to render. And as you can see with the rendering, it's the same theme where I go from big to small. I'm trying to place in all the big details first, and then once I place in the big details, then I'll start working smaller and smaller and smaller and start putting in all the finer details. But again, we need to get the big problems out of the way first, and then we can start working on the smaller and smaller details as we go. So what I'll do is again, I'm doing a lot of this with the blending soft brush, and I also use the smudge tool. I use is the same exact brush as well, so I can move the colors around. And here I'm just playing around and doing this on a separate layer to see what works and what doesn't work. And I'm doing it on a separate layer just because if this doesn't work and I don't like it, as I didn't like it, I could just delete it real quickly. And also, so you could see with the character, for example, with the helmet, on the left side of the helmet, I don't use just one hue. There's a little bit of there's a shifting of the hue depending on the temperature of the light. So for example, it might be a little difficult to see the part of the helmet closest to the light is going to be a yellow hue, and as it shifts away, it starts shifting from yellow to orange to red, and the value also drops off until you get into the colder part of the helmet, which is going to be this very desaturated purple hue. And that's again why I like to use the color wheel, because it makes stuff like this so much easier. And here I go again, just blocking in like a lot of the highlights, a lot of the bigger details, and I'm choosing to keep the warm lights on the left side of the character, just because that lava is a lot closer onto that side of the character. And I don't worry about making all the lighting like very perfect. I'm just working from big to small, and as long as you get like the big elements out of the way and solve the big problems, people are going to give you like a lot of leniency. They don't really care too much. Again, if you get like the bigger problems out of the way, like the composition out of the way, then you have a lot more grace to mess other things up. And as you can see, I'm going in and I'm refining things, I'm rendering things, and here's where I'm using those references of those demons to start blocking in like the demons on top of the valley. And as you see, as I said earlier, where I work from big, medium to small, I have the big demon in the front, and then I have a medium-sized demon a little further off, and then I have all the little small demons over there. And just as like a quick tip for like rendering, so you're not wasting so much time, is that it seems kind of obvious to me, but maybe it's not obvious to other people, but the closer something is, the more that you're going to have to render it, especially if it's like your main subject. And as things move away from the focal point, or they move further away in the art piece, then you don't have to worry about rendering so much, and it's going to save you a lot of time just doing that. And here I am making the bottom part of the sky a very dark, desaturated red, because red kind of gives a sense of danger as well, and I also want to keep that part dark in order to make the piece, the cross above it and the skyline around it seem a lot brighter, because there's more contrast. And here I'm just messing around as well with that smudge tool I told you about, with the soft blend. Then I'll just keep on going, refining it. I'll look up a reference for a ridge, and I won't perfectly render it. I'll just kind of see what a ridge kind of looks like, and then I'll just start adding cracks and little crevices throughout the art piece. But again, I'm not really too worried about rendering that too much. For me, my artwork kind of leans a lot on the composition and the spiritual element of it, and not so much of making like the most perfect, beautiful, pretty picture ever. And I do think that throughout time, as I get better, I'm just going to naturally start making better and prettier pieces. But for now, I'm just kind of working on just getting the repetitions through, and it can be really easy to spend way too much time trying to make a pretty picture. Like, you spend, like, for me, it took me about like 3 hours to make this, and it can be really easy to spend like another 3 to 5 hours just trying to perfect everything else, when it's like you're only going to improve it by like 5% or 10% maybe if you're lucky. That's about it for this art piece. I hope you took something away from it, and I'm going to, depending on how popular this video is with an audience, I'm going to continue making content just like this, where I just break down my process for making these art pieces and just everything that goes into it. So that's it for this video. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like for the algorithm. It does mean a lot, especially because this channel is so tiny. And that is it for this video. Peace.